Welcome to the Run Out. I am your host, Neil Barrett. Today's episode is probably going to be a little weird. I don't really know what to expect. I had planned for us to have a guest today, and kind of at the last minute, they cut out, which probably turns out to be fine because it's been a pretty big news week. So there's lots to talk about, but I'm not quite as prepared for what to talk about as I want to be. So this might be slightly more relaxed than all other episodes of this podcast will be, but I am going to get the guest rescheduled. I think it's going to be about 2 more weeks before they are on. It's going to be great. So make sure that you are subscribed and will receive notifications for when that drops. But for now, we are just going to roll right along with the headlines. So without further ado, let's go. Without a doubt, the number one story this week has been the PLL's announcement of the WLL, or Women's Lacrosse League. They didn't release a ton of information. What they did say is that it will start as 4 teams playing in a sixes tournament at the PLL's championship series this February, and that names, branding, rosters, coaches, and even the cities that the teams will play from will be announced before the end of the year. They did say that the games would be televised and that the league will not interfere with Athletes Unlimited. Players will be able to play in both leagues, and it is being viewed as a way to get players closer to being full-time athletes. So overall, I kind of think that while we all probably wish that this was a little bit more, I've even heard this being described as women playing lacrosse, not women's lacrosse. I do think that this is probably the best, easiest, most kind of cost-effective way to get the women's league off the ground. Sixes will take less players. There's 12-man rosters. Women's lacrosse as a whole, it has 12 players on the field at a time, and they will already have the field booked. ESPN cameras will be there, referees will be there. It is going to be the most cost-effective way to launch this. I am viewing it as kind of a soft launch. I do kind of expect that there will probably, in my mind, if I was building it, this is more of an expansion of kind of the Unleashed principles, and I would expect to see maybe a kind of dry run of what the WLL could look like in the future during the All-Star game. I think in the past they have used the All-Star game as a way to try out new things, and I think that would be a really good opportunity for testing out what a WLL like full league could look like. If you're asking me what that would look like, I'm envisioning a modified women's rules set, somewhat like what the PLL plays in relation to a typical men's rule set. So I'm thinking that they will probably play on the PLL field, so it will be a smaller field size. I'm thinking they might drop it down to 10. 12 feels like it might start to get a little crowded. Then again, maybe not. It could just be a change in kind of thinking about the way that the game is played, and they'll keep the 12 players, but 10 would also draw down the numbers a little bit. I think 10 makes more sense, but I could be convinced that 12. I would imagine also probably a shorter shot clock. They would keep maybe the 2-point line, maybe even adding in an 8-foot arc or so. I think that this allows for the PLL and WLL to exist on the same field, which is, I think, going to be very important. Paul indicated in the press conference that the WLL teams would expand the footprint of the PLL rather than being in the same cities as the PLL teams. I think I would expect that to maybe be somewhat true. I think they would have a hard time leaving out some cities. I can't imagine Maryland not having a WLL team. The Terrapins and women's lacrosse are just so synced together that I can't envision them not getting a team. So maybe the WLL team doesn't technically play at Hopkins or wherever the Maryland Whipsnakes play. Maybe they play at Maryland University or, some other location. But I have to think that Maryland is a lock to get a WLL team. I also kind of feel like Boston is a probably very likely to get one. Charlotte North has been everywhere in promoting the WLL, and obviously her connections to Boston College and the success that BC has had over the last 5 or so years really kind of means, similar to like what I said about Maryland, they've become so synonymous with the game that I think they have to be very high on the list, if not almost a lock to get a team. As my dark horse, I'd probably have North Carolina getting a team. There is a ton of women's lacrosse played in North Carolina. I don't have the numbers on this, but I'm willing to bet that outside of the hotbed areas, it probably has the most women's lacrosse participation. Again, like I said, outside of maybe like New York and Maryland and maybe even like a Boston or something kind of area. I think they have the most. They are also the only place outside of the aforementioned hotbed areas to host the NCAA Women's National Championships. The question would be, would they put it in Charlotte and kind of link them with the chaos, or would they put it in like a Raleigh area where more of that women's lacrosse is being played? I'm not saying they are definitely going to get one, but I do have them as a dark horse. As far as expanding the footprint outside of PLL cities, I think Florida, Chicago, Louisville, and probably, I don't have a specific place in mind, but one of the Pac-12 kind of areas, whether that's LA around USC or somewhere in Arizona, or maybe even up into like Oregon and Washington. I don't know for sure where I see them playing, but I wouldn't be too surprised to see a Pac-12 area winning one of these WLL franchises. Ultimately, I think the WLL sounds great. We can discuss, sixes until we're blue in the face, but the fact of the matter is that sixes, whether you personally like it or not, is happening. It is going to be at the Olympics, and leagues are going to embrace that at least until LA 28 happens. And we'll see what happens after that, because there is no guarantee that just because it's in the 2028 Olympics in LA, that it will also then be in the 2032 Olympics or 2036 or any future Olympics. It could be another 100 years before we see it in the Olympics, but leagues are going to embrace it at least until that 2028 time frame. So you just kind of have to keep that in mind and go into it with an open mind and hope that this kind of pushes the sport to the forefront of people's minds, and maybe coming out of it, we can grow in ways that we're not really fully expecting right now. And for the WLL to even exist, I think is awesome for the game. I can't wait to see some of these women on the field. And I do hope that ultimately, even if it takes a couple of years, it leads to a full women's lacrosse league playing, a 10-game schedule like the PLL does now, with full teams and branding and everything. I think that would be so cool and so fun. And the fact that they can do this now and stay in Athletes Unlimited is great for us being able to see the best of the best play, because I can't imagine that they're going to make in the WLL for one, kind of week-long tournament the same kind of money that they're going to make in Athletes Unlimited. And so I think you would see more people playing in that than the WLL if they had to choose. So all that being said, I think it is a great opportunity, and I am really excited to see what happens on the field in February. And I'm really excited to see the team names and branding that are going to be dropping before the end of the year. I have a feeling that there's going to be some cool stuff, and I'm going to need some merch. So the next big story this week happened early this week when the NLL announced 13 new cities being added to the NLL UnBOXed initiative, bringing their total count to 36 cities involved across the US and Canada. That is a mind-boggling number if you have been around the game for very long. I know it's not 36 direct teams, but having a footprint in 36 cities is crazy. This is the first of 3 planned expansions that will put the NLL in 60 markets across North America when it's all said and done. Again, talk about a baffling number. That's crazy. I also find the use of the term North America really interesting, because so far they have very specifically talked about 36 cities across the US and Canada. And then when talking about further expansion, they always say 60 markets across North America, which is pretty interesting. It makes me think that Mexico, Puerto Rico, and Jamaica are likely to have some kind of presence here. Those 3 countries specifically have made big waves in the international community. All 3, I believe, have box teams that compete in the WBLC every 4 years, and have definitely made waves on the field stage as well in international competition. So I think that's really cool, really crazy to think about the NLL expanding out that far. Again, I know it's not full teams, but it's still kind of crazy to think about having 60, markets across, 4 different countries, assuming that they get there, 5 different countries, assuming that they do all of what I have suggested that they might do. It's a really interesting time to be in this area. Again, like I said, if you've been around this game for a long period of time, like I have, those numbers are crazy to hear about. I still see a lot of people online who are confused by NLL UnBOXed and what it's trying to do and who it's trying to reach out to and how it is designed to help grow the game. Currently, the only thing that we know about NLL UnBOXed is that it is a grassroots outreach program designed to go into schools, bring speed lacrosse as a curriculum, and Powell Lacrosse donating a bunch of sticks. And the idea is that we get sticks into a bunch of kids' hands, teach them how to play, let them enjoy playing, have fun with it, while giving them kind of this branding to kind of rally around in their area. The NLL has said that these may down the road become franchises. For instance, the Charlotte Cobras were announced in my home state of North Carolina, and this fall they have gone into several Charlotte schools, brought sticks, equipment, training curriculum to introduce these kids to the game. And merch is supposed to be dropping in early 2025, which will obviously make a little bit of money, probably help progress unboxed campaigns, as well as obviously probably put a little extra money in the NLL's pockets. But it will also give those communities kind of a unifying symbol to kind of rally around. If you are one of several schools in the Charlotte area participating in the NLL UnBOXed program, you can kind of combine your experience and everything under the Charlotte Cobras umbrella. I think it is a really cool idea. We will see how it all plays out. But one of the things that I found really interesting about the NLL UnBOXed program is that it was a response to USA Lacrosse's Elevate 28 initiative. And I can already kind of hear you saying, what the hell is the Elevate 28 initiative? So Elevate 28 is a US lacrosse initiative that aims to double the amount of participants playing lacrosse under the US lacrosse system from 2 million to 4 million by the end of the decade. It is called Elevate 28 because initially all the reports were that they had this goal by the Olympics in 2028. There are 8 charter members of Elevate 28, the IMLCA, the IWLCA, Athletes Unlimited Lacrosse, JSI Sports, which is Joe Tsai's sports arm, the National Lacrosse League, the Premier Lacrosse League, USA Lacrosse, and World Lacrosse. Being that Elevate 28 is kind of not really been talked about enough, I thought, again, we could kind of go over some of it. As I said, their mission is to double participation in USA Lacrosse. According to their website, they have 4 ways they plan to do this. I want to read these 4 to you because there are some problems. Let's talk about them. Number 1 is rally behind each other's efforts, such as National Celebrate Lacrosse Week. And I hear you, just like I thought, what the hell is National Celebrate Lacrosse Week? That's a good question. So National Celebrate Lacrosse Week was actually about 2 weeks ago, and it is an initiative set out by USA Lacrosse to provide camps and clinics, including free pick up and play clinics around the country. Last year, they had, I believe it was 31 states involved. It is somewhat similar, if any of you guys are involved in hockey, to the USA Hockey Try Hockey for Free days. They usually do twice a year. I believe Canada Hockey also does it. Essentially, they provide free hockey equipment, skates, gloves, helmets, all kinds of stuff, and provide clinics for people to get out on the ice and give hockey a try twice a year. And National Celebrate Lacrosse Week is USA Lacrosse's version of USA Hockey's Try Hockey for Free Day, except that if goal number 1 of Elevate 28 is rally behind each other's efforts, why is no one talking about it? As far as I'm concerned, rallying behind each other's efforts, the bare minimum of that is sharing and talking about what the other groups involved are doing. But we're not getting that. The PLL isn't talking about National Celebrate Lacrosse Week. World Lacrosse isn't talking about the NLL UnBOXed initiative. There is no rallying behind each other's efforts as the number 1 bullet point under how we will do this tries to point out. The second item on how they will do this is maximize the number of individuals that one stick can affect by working with schools and multi-sport organizations such as Boys and Girls Club, Parks and Rec departments, and the YMCA to introduce players to the sport. This is the one that actually feels somewhat concrete and like there's a kind of a roadmap of, okay, this is how we're going to increase participation twofold in the next 7 years. It also seems to be the thing that the NLL looked at and thought, okay, this is the roadmap. How can we make it happen? And NLL UnBOXed, at least phase 1 so far, has been this exact thing. They are getting sticks and teaching curriculum into PE classes at schools around the US and Canada so far. As we discussed, it seems like they might be expounding into other areas of North America, and they are doing this exact thing. Number 3 on how they plan to do this is increase exposure to the sport through broadcast and digital channels, helping drive additional investment in the sports infrastructure. This is already being done. I don't even understand why this is on here, because every single one of these platforms, not just the PLL, but even IMLCA, IWLCA, everyone is trying to increase exposure to the sport by using their digital and broadcast channels. And they're all hoping to drive additional investment in the sports infrastructure. Like that was already taking place before this initiative. It's going to be taking place after the initiative. Just existing is doing something to raise the level of lacrosse. So I don't want to poo-poo that, but when you're writing out how we are going to achieve this very specific goal, these things that you're already doing aren't changing the course of the trajectory of growth in lacrosse. You are going to just continue to grow at this rate. You're not doing something different to accelerate that growth rate. Similarly, with the last one, leverage the visibility from lacrosse's inclusion in the LA 28 Olympics to spur additional growth. Again, this is going to happen whether it's part of this initiative or not. And again, that's fine. We're not poo-pooing that, but we are talking about trying to very specifically lay out a roadmap to get us from 2 million participants now, or last year, whenever they drew that number, to 4 million by the end of the decade. That's 7 years to double participation. This roadmap is basically nothing. And the NLL seems to be the only one who has laid out a system by which we are going to actively attract new players who have no connection to the game. Athletes Unlimited does run camps during the season, but those, along with PLL Play, are designed to take players that are already in the game and raise their level of play. They're not designed to get new players in. In 2022, the PLL started Goals for Greatness, which is designed to make the game more accessible to people, especially people who don't live in lacrosse hotbeds, who maybe don't have access to goals. They have the goal of donating 2 goals to every state in the US every year. So every year they are donating 100 goals across the country. The issue with that is twofold. One, if you go to their website, you can see in 2022 that they completed their mission of 2 goals in every 50 state. The issue is they don't tell you where they put those goals. Second, there is no updated data. Paul Rabel himself has mentioned several times that he has continued it, but even the website for Goals for Greatness does not have any data that says they have continued to do it beyond 2022. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that it isn't being done. I'm just saying that I live in New Hampshire. In theory, they should have donated at least 6 goals to New Hampshire by now. And I have no idea where any of those are, if any of them are remotely close to me, how I could get to one to use it. So how are we expected to, grow the game, even in a relatively small way, not to, again, poo-poo anyone's donation to growing the game, but it is a relatively minor thing to provide goals. But how are we even supposed to use those? How if I want to get my kid introduced to the game, how am I supposed to know where those are if you're not telling us? I think you could make an argument that PLL Street Lacrosse is kind of an outreach, kind of grassroots idea. The issue is that as of yet, they have only really used it as this kind of event showcasing kind of the idea and how it could be used. They've also used it, I think, as kind of a marketing tool to draw in investors and say, like, hey, look at this thing that we can do. But as of yet, they have yet to really implement it in any meaningful way in the areas that they have even been to, much less areas outside of the PLL footprint currently. So all that to say, lots of people have lots to say about the NLL UnBOXed initiative and how terrible it is, but the NLL is one of the only places actively trying to grow the game. Additionally, about an hour before I sat down to record, the NLL announced a quote 6-figure investment with the launch of NLL Plus. It's not entirely clear whether the NLL invested 6 figures, if a third party came in and invested 6 figures, or what exactly that means, but that is the phrase that they were using, 6-figure investment. What NLL Plus means for you specifically varies depending on where you're listening to the runout from. If you are listening to the runout in the United States, not too much will happen. You will still have access to all of the regular season and playoff games through ESPN Plus. The only slight tweak is that a month after the game ends, when they are normally taken off of ESPN Plus, and that's not just for the NLL, it's the PLL has that, everybody has that so that they can kind of clear up space. But at that point, you in the United States will be able to access full game replays on NLL Plus, as well as highlights and exclusive NLL Plus content that you can access at any point. If you're listening in Canada, you will have access to the games that aren't on TSN through NLL Plus. I know that I have heard in the past that has been a big problem for Canadian NLL fans, is that they could only watch some games on TSN. And if your game was not being shown on TSN, you were just out of luck. You couldn't watch it. So they will get access to the games that are not on TSN, as well as kind of the same thing that I just said about the US. They'll have highlights and exclusive NLL content on there the rest of the time. If you are not in one of those two situations, you will have full access to all 126 regular season and playoff games through NLL Plus. It is all for free. There is nothing to pay for. You just sign up. You don't have to put in a credit card. I was poking around it earlier today. They already have a little bit of exclusive NLL Plus content, as well as you can watch all of the playoff games from last year already on NLL Plus. It looks like they are going to have content divided up by team, so you'll be able to go in and pick your specific team and see all the content related to them. There are, as always, going to be a few questions and a few things that we won't really know until we get to experience it. What will the quality of the streams be? I know that they are taking the regular regional sports networks broadcasts and are repackaging them and showing them on NLL Plus. So it's not like the old LSN days where you had like a guy up there with like a cell phone recording games. It is not going to be anything like that. But especially after the Netflix debacle with the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight, people are really worried about the stream quality. We won't really know until we get there, but all signs point to it being pretty decent. Again, we're not going to have whatever the number was. I've heard 60, I've heard 150. Either way, we are not going to have tens of millions of people tuning in to a single game at a time. So hopefully we can withstand the demand. But obviously, again, that will remain to be seen. And this kind of brings me to a point where I'm going to go off the rails a little bit. This is not in my outline, but between the WLL announcement, the NLL UnBOXed announcement, and the NLL Plus announcement, there's just so much negativity going on about lacrosse. A friend of mine described it as the lacrosse community constantly wanting people to grow the game and invest in new ways to increase access to the sport and to watching games. And every time somebody comes up with a way to do that, this entire community explodes and is like, that's stupid. This is a dumb idea. It's never going to work. And it's just, again, probably because that NLL Plus announcement was like an hour ago, it has just really worn on me today. And it's really driving me crazy. And I just don't understand how we look at all of this stuff and we're like, no, this is terrible. This is stupid. It's like, if it isn't NFL quality or NFL level or whatever, we don't want to deal with it. And I don't even know what to say. It's just, today was a lot. It was really frustrating to read through comments, especially because so many of them involve clicking the link, the NLL Plus announcement. If you just clicked the link in the social media post, it answered like 95% of the questions. You know, people complained about the WLL and it being sixes and it not being enough. And it's like, if we don't do this, there isn't a WLL. So, you know, I get it. We want it to be more. We want it to be what we want it to be. We want it to be the biggest sport in the world, but it's not going to happen overnight, and we're going to have to grow. And I don't know. The negativity is a lot. I've been thinking a lot about my buddy George. A lot of you guys may remember him in the early Instagram lacrosse community days as FL Stringer. And when the PLL was announced, I was giving it a lot of stick and going after it a lot. And George said to me one day, he said, I notice you complaining a lot. And I don't remember what I said, but I'm sure it was something to the effect of, well, there's a lot to complain about. And there may have been, you know, early days, it was a lot. It's hard when you don't know all the information. And I do think, generally speaking, across the board, the PLO could still improve its transparency on certain things. There are a lot of things that I've had to learn to understand why they don't tell us things, but I still think, even with that knowledge, that they could be better. So I know that my response was something about there being lots to complain about. And George said, yeah, but you don't offer any solutions. You are complaining basically to complain. And I don't think that we always have to have the answer or the solution. There are lots of things that I probably don't know about the PLL and the NLL and Athletes Unlimited and USA Lacrosse and all of those things. And I don't understand things that would justify why they have done it the way that they have done it. So there are always going to be times when, you know, your anger and negativity is justified about a certain decision. But so often our complaining is just to complain, and we're not looking for solutions, and we just want to be angry. And I don't know, like I said, this was a little bit off script. I don't even know how to wrap this part up, but like I said, it was really frustrating. It has been really frustrating for probably the last 2 weeks to be a lacrosse fan in social media and just hearing all of the complaints, the needless complaints, the baseless complaints, the complaints just for the sake of complaining, offering no solutions. NLL Plus. Oh, well, the last time, I hope it's better than the last time, because the last time was really bad. That was the last time. It's not this time, and we don't know what it's going to be like. And look, you got a week. NLL starts next weekend. So if in 2 weeks from now you have experienced it and you want to complain, cool. We're there. I'm with you. Let's get some better streams. But also remember, it's free. And remember that if you're in the position to have to use NLL Plus, it means that you are in a position that last season you wouldn't have been able to watch the game. So, is a bad stream great? No. But is a bad stream better than no stream? Yeah. It's progress, and we can improve on it. So, again, I don't know. I've gone off the rails, but that was just something that I wanted to get off my chest. I don't really know how to wrap this up, so let's just move on to some updates. For those of us that were pretty intently following the Pat Cavanaugh trade last week, right after I recorded my podcast, I'm pretty sure it was the next day, we started getting details of the trade and how it all came about. First up, Topher Adams, the Outlaws beat writer for the PLL, reported that Pat Cavanaugh was actively being shopped around by the Cannons. And that seemed so crazy because, Pat Cavanaugh was arguably a top 3 NCAA lacrosse player last season that the Cannons used their first round draft pick on, and he spent half of the season injured and the other half not quite fitting in. And it seemed so mind-boggling that they would be shopping this guy. And then about an hour after that, Phil Shore reported for USA Lacrosse magazine that Pat Cavanaugh had asked the Cannons for a trade at the end of the season, that he was not super happy with where he was playing. And when he asked about it, they said that it was likely for him to continue playing that position in midfield, and he asked for a trade. There was a little bit of a back and forth, and then ultimately the Cannons did choose to honor that request and were actively shopping him around. The other thing that came out of Topher Adams' article for the PLL website was that the Outlaws have not abandoned the idea of trotting out an attack line of Pat Cavanaugh, Logan Wisnauskas, and Brennan O'Neill, the last 3 Tewaaraton winners. I have come to dub this line the Triple Crown line. I can't imagine a better on paper attack line than those 3. I don't know how well it will work in practice. In fact, there might be a pretty substantial argument that it would not work in practice, but on paper, it seems like a no-brainer. And it's kind of crazy to hear that the Outlaws have not given up on that idea. So definitely going to be something that we are going to keep an eye on in the upcoming months. But that's it for this week. Next week, we are going all in on the NLL. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all those great things. So make sure that you don't miss next week's episode. It's going to be great. So until then, I'll see you next week.